Hmm? Oh, I know.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 2nd, it's May already, edition of the Abington Finance Committee meetings. We are continuing in our process of preparing for town meeting, going over the budget and the warrant articles. We have a fairly light agenda for tonight. We are going to go over any questions, issues that anyone has on the budget and the warrant articles for either the special or annual town meetings. And then we'll get our liaison reports, correspondence, of which there is none, and any other updates that we have. We have our town manager with us. Excellent.
Now been reviewed by town council, and there's a extraordinarily small change. It's only to the language on the collective bargaining article with police. So I'll leave copies with Deb, and she can pass them down. It's like a little bit easier. There's more, obviously, copies than is here present. And just for your knowledge, I think that you do already know that the funding needs already came into place for the current fiscal year. So Article 3, there will be a funding requirement. Funds are actually available within the existing police budget. I will be drafting a motion for your review, and hopefully one that you will utilize, that actually refers back to the vote in town meeting to fund the existing budget. When I say I'll be drafting a motion, essentially town council has told me what the motion should say, so I won't claim credit for that. It's approximately $50,000 to $60,000. Those funds are available currently in the police budget, primarily because, as you know, some of you know, there's some vacancies that within the department. Vacancies do create the need for overtime, but that also does, and that has an there's still some funds available because of those vacancies. The chief is able to commit towards the funding requirement for the collective bargaining agreement. That also, the funds for FY19, as you know from our discussion last week, are built into the FY19 budget already, and that is approximately, actually, it's almost exactly $200,000. So, in addition to what previously been presented before the ratification of that agreement in the past couple of weeks by the Board of Selectmen and the police.
Mr. Tyler. Doctor.
Rick, what is the transfer? Which line item is being transferred to which? So the Article 3 says a transfer from available
Well,
funds.
actually, that's what the article says, but it actually won't be. The motion will actually.
Raise and appropriate.
It would actually be, the motion will actually say, ask the town to recognize the ratification of the agreement, said funds all existing from the FY, the vote of the annual town meeting of June, whatever, I almost said 2017. So it actually isn't a transfer from any other budget. It's actually a recognition of the agreement and a recognition that the funds are available in the vote of the town at the last annual town meeting and the police salaries on it.
No, no worries. The first part is just the ratification. The other part is just simply, or the acceptance, I should say. The other part is just more pomp and circumstance. Hey, taxpayers, we already funded it.
Correct.
So just we're looking for you, the town body, to say, yes, you agree to, got it.
honor this agreement, yes. And it'll be a lot more articulate than what just came out of my mouth.
No, it's easy to follow. It was fun.
Town meeting last year was May 22nd.
Okay, May 22nd, I'm sorry.
I looked back at that recently, so. Barbara, I believe you had a question?
Did We talked at the end of the last meeting about asking the petitioner or someone up for the articles,
Planning board articles?
planning board articles.
So from the information
Well, they weren't
that
planning board articles, they were petition articles, a petitioner.
Correct.
Yes, I was told by the petitioner that he was gonna contact the chairman, because his concern was that as the appointing authority of this board, that it would be a conflict of interest for him to be the person here. And that he was going to request member or members of the planning board after their public hearing. Because as you know, the planning board is holding public hearings on all of the zoning articles, even the petition articles, that the planning board make their report to the finance committee after the public hearings, which conclude next Monday evening. So presumably, and again, I'm only reporting what was told to me by Mr. Riley, the petitioner, that next Wednesday evening, somebody from the planning board will hopefully report their recommendations to you.
Does someone from our board need to reach out to someone from their board, or was the petitioner taking care of that? Or had you heard from the
I
petitioner?
actually have not received any communication.
I'll be happy to ask, through the chairman initially, if someone from the planning board would be, or members from the planning board would be happy.
Yeah, if someone could be available for next Wednesday, that would
Happy
be,
to make that request.
yep. And we'll meet with them first, since we'll have to do our recommendations after that, so.
Yeah, in that same vein, I mentioned to Matt before the meeting tonight that council has recommended that we wait until after the planning board's recommendations on those articles, the zoning articles, rather than the petition articles, which, as you know, have to be posted as a
Right.
petition. And the town council can update based upon the warrant, based upon their recommendations, that we hold off on actually posting the annual town meeting warrant. We post a special this week, only because if there are substantial changes, which there very may well be, that it could create a chaotic town meeting if there's substantial changes with significant, with motions that are so different from the actual posting, that it could actually create a posting problem. If the recommendation is so substantially different from what's posted, it could be an article
That you
now
can't
that's
even,
out of order.
right, out of order.
So, or at the very least, it could create a chaotic scene at town meeting where there's so many red line versions of motions or, so it's just as well as, I guess, that the planning board report will make after the public hearing, so, which again, should conclude Monday evening. So, a little bit unusual, but it's unusual that there be so many zoning articles at one town meeting.
Yes.
Good luck. Glad I deal with finance and personnel, et cetera. Sometimes I'm glad. Sometimes
Yeah, I thought so.
we qualify that.
Yeah, actually, you might want to come closer to the microphone. Excellent point.
For the first time in like a long time, I have no idea what we're talking about. I hope I'm not the only one. And it has nothing to do with how you're talking. I don't even.
So last week, at the end of
The-
last week's
the
meeting.
planning thing.
Yeah,
We had, remember those articles?
yeah, the guy that wants to change all the
Right.
wording.
Yep.
And so, the planning board, those articles have a lot to do with like zoning.
Yep.
And planning, so the planning board though is meeting and, going over a bunch of different, things on the books or on the warrant.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, they may have substantial changes to some of the stuff that we see, or they may make different recommendations.
Okay.
And so until they've done all of that meeting, our town council has said that it's not a good idea for us to post the town meeting warrant, the annual town meeting
Yeah.
warrant. So they've posted the special, but.
I understand, yeah.
Won't post the
Yeah,
annual
yeah, yeah.
because there may be too many changes, and then if the article reads extremely differently, we could get to town meeting and it could be called out of order, and because it
It doesn't give sufficient notice.
It's
as
not
to
within
what's
the
being
scope.
voted.
I get
We're
you.
asking the public to vote.
And then we won't be able to do
Yes.
anything with it.
Right. And pursuant to state law, a special town meeting warrant has to be posted at least 14 days before the meeting. And an annual town meeting warrant has to be posted at least 7 days. So there is so we have a little more time before we actually legally have to post an annual town meeting warrant. So we've been recommended to use that time a little bit.
Sure.
Use a few more days, let the planning board finish their legal public hearing notice, their business, before we actually post it, so.
And then after they do that, they could come and talk to us and answer our questions next Wednesday. And
And that will make it a little bit better with whatever we say or
Right.
whatever.
Correct.
Understand, now I get
The other.
it. Sorry for not understanding where that was
No,
going.
no,
Well,
all right.
you would, how would you?
The
Yeah.
other piece of the issue that was confusing is that the petitioner for the articles is the town moderator
Right.
who appoints us.
Oh.
So it could be
didn't know
construed
that.
as a conflict of interest that the person
would be
who
a
put
conflict of
us
interest.
on the board is coming before us
Oh.
saying, hey, recommend these things.
All right, so
he
that's the guy
wants-
that
So he wants someone else to
Yeah.
come instead of him, so that there's no perceived conflict of interest.
It makes sense.
Explain what
I
the
actually didn't
issues
know who
are.
that was
So-
when you guys were talking about it, but now I.
Not that anybody gets paid or anything, but still, it's
Yes.
still well, again, a lot of times.
True.
Not that but the perception could be.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Taken in that way, so.
So I had a question.
Yes.
That has been lingering in my mind since last week's meeting. I'm not sure I fully understood Article 4 about how we were choosing to pay for the snow and ice.
Yes. And as I mentioned, it's essentially administrative ease. The snow and ice deficit is approximately $450,000. So the town accountant has requested that rather than pay for it from, all from free cash, and then utilize a combination of raise and appropriate and free cash for the capital plan and other needs on the rest of the warrant, that we use, essentially, fund the capital program from free cash, use and raise and appropriate most of the funds on the recap sheet, which people don't see, but it's how at the end of the process, we fill out the recap sheet, which is what we used when we set a tax rate. So essentially, we have to set aside funds in the budget process to balance the budget. So we have to pay the balance of our snow and ice deficit first, before we spend anything, you have to balance your snow and ice deficit, because you are allowed legally to overexpend. So for administrative ease, we just pay the balance of our snow and ice deficit with free, once we raise and appropriate that, what we have left to raise and appropriate in terms of bottom line dollars, we pay the balance from free cash, but raise and appropriate the rest. So she only has to make one journal entry and use the rest of our free cash.
It makes, you're on the struggle bus today, buddy.
Yeah.
Your explanation's tough. I get it fully. The recap sheet piece is what's key. This is literally administrative ease. We have free cash coming in, we're moving 88 grand, we're paying the remainder of snow and ice at the end of the year when we have to submit to the DOR saying, here's our balanced budget. In order to do so, if the funds that we originally have is that funny term of raise and appropriate, which we've done over time.
See, I'm not sure that helps everybody else here. The town accountant can explain it a lot better. I know what I'm talking about. That's really what it is. You have so many funds. If you look at the front page of the summary sheet, the summary budget sheet, and you can see general fund operations and revenue estimates. You can see the levy limit, plus the 2.5 plus new growth. And then it comes down to a levy limit, and you can see how,
Subtotal.
right, and then you have cherry sheet estimates, and then you have the total estimated receipts, and you get down to a bottom number ultimately of how much you can raise and appropriate, and then on top of that you have other revenue sources. And it's just as easy to use, to raise and appropriate, you know, and then use other revenue sources as one lump sum. So it's just, again, administrative ease in terms of how much is a bottom line you put towards different, you know, put in different cups, you know. So I'm not helping him.
I think I understand it.
Yeah.
Think.
Yeah, so, because at the end of the process, when we have to submit our, you know, recapitulation sheet to the Department of Revenue, and tell them how we spent our money so that we can set a tax rate, the first thing you have to do is show that you have a balanced budget, and the first thing at the top is show you don't have a snow and ice deficit, because as you know, that's the only item you can
Have a
overspend.
deficit.
In doing so, the way we're gonna show that is to show that we raised $450,000 on the recap sheet to offset, or actually the balance between that and $88,000. So it's just
370.
one number instead of a whole bunch of different numbers to show that we have a balanced budget from all these items.
It's
I
a,
know Greg doesn't get it because he doesn't understand how the
it-
DOR does it.
it's a
I
DOR
know.
true-up, and it wants to ensure, that's ultimately what it comes down to, DOR true-up. In order to get your free cash certified, it wants to ensure that you did not overspend any of the town meeting appropriated cash. At the end of the day, when they say you budgeted $50 million for your town,
Yep.
and you spent $50,500,000, and that 500,000 is in your snow ice piece, then they say before you spend any other money, you have to pay that debt.
Yep.
So it's gonna come from those sources within your town budget or other. And that other would be other town, your free cash that becomes available later.
Next year, I'm gonna overrule
so-
the town accountants.
So the
and
money
do it
that
my
will
way.
get turned back into free cash?
Yep.
That's the money that we're gonna use to
And-
pay that.
Yeah, we've been using that the last several years, just our free cash to balance it at the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
Because it's, you know,
So resources to use, in the back of our minds, the DOR site, it's called the Division of Local Services, you ever look up, you hear that, the cherry sheet? The cherry sheet will give you an indication as to what your unrestricted government aid happens to be, what your lottery monies happen to be, what your free cash will happen to be. You can also dig in to look at the recapitulation sheet to say, okay, how does this beginning balance, ending balance, how do we arrive at the two? And that's all this move is legitimately for her, because government accounting standards are different than what you and I would be used
Right.
to. She has a hell of a lot more moves, debit this account, credit this account, and follow that chain. So her trial balance is now a ledger-sized piece of paper.
Yeah, yeah.
That's hard. In this particular example, move one item. She has 2 journal entries that she has to worry about instead of 19.
Yep.
it's the same bottom line, it's just how she
How
applies
we
it.
get
It's
there.
that simple, so.
Okay.
I'm not sure you were helping much there either, Sean, just to be honest.
No, I mean, I get it. It's basically coming out of a bank account somewhere, it's just 2 different bank accounts, or it's something other than that-ish.
Or it's
We have money.
one instead of out of
Yeah,
19.
We voted to spend it.
Exactly.
Now we're just allocating it to
Yep.
the right
Lots
place.
of times what we do, how it's been handled previously, is that there's X amount left from, they're gonna move money from what's being turned back for,
Salaries
Well,
for
yes.
positions that weren't filled in a specific.
right, like, and so they'll say that they're moving that.
To
Say it's
cover.
$20,000, that $20,000 is going towards snow and ice. Then there's another item that is money that's being turned back in, that's 50,000. That 50,000 is, and you can have like what was it?
So the snow and ice is one of the only things that you can move stuff around like that.
It's
You,
the-
you,
it's
you,
the only account in municipal government that you can legally overspend, because you can go into zero minus.
Yep.
and you
But
may
meaning
go
you
in
could take it out of a
deficit.
school thing if there was a surplus. You could take it out of
So
anything.
So for the, at the time of the special town meeting, that's when we could take things that are left over
Correct.
out of others to balance
I
the
understand.
books. But we can't, the difference with the snow and ice is those other line items, we can't overspend.
Right.
So if there's a line item that
Gotcha.
says gas and oil for the police department and it's $12,000, for example, we can't spend 12,001.
Exactly.
I got you.
Only spend
Without-
12,000.
That's right, that's right. Now, keep in mind too, that for many, many years, finding money at the end of a fiscal year to balance your snow and ice account was virtually impossible. So
Yeah.
you would have to carry that deficit into the following fiscal year. And when we talk about, you know, the recap, the recapitulation sheet,
Yep.
if you overspent your snow and ice by, call it, you know, $400,000, you'd have to raise that, you'd have to make accommodation to balance that at the beginning of next fiscal year before you spend a dime on anything else.
I got you.
So that's, you know, that's essentially the problem you create by not balancing it, if finding a way to balance it by the end of the fiscal year you spent it in.
Sure.
So,
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the massive winter a few winters ago, we had to do.
yeah, in fact, it was so bad, the state actually allowed communities to raise that over 5 years, which is unheard of. But that was the first time. And even if a community could have found a way to pay for it, well, if we can basically have an interest-free loan for 5 years, why not do it? You know, it'd be crazy not to do that, so, but,
Sure.
but in any event, so.
Other questions, other topics, or does anyone have any more on this specific topic while we're here?
And there will be some requested end-of-year transfers in June as the Finance Committee concludes its business. And the Department of Revenue has lifted the restrictions on caps and, they probably won't be significant, but that's why there isn't a menu anymore for the last couple of years. There isn't a menu that we present at town meeting for end-of-year line item transfers. You may remember that from last year, those of you who, some of you will remember that. For a number of years, there would have been a menu for that special town meeting in May or June, which becomes a problem because there's still maybe those last-minute transfers at the very end, which would lead to unpaid bills the following year, which could be difficult, so.
6 and 7, we're just,
The Board of Selectmen still thought it was a good idea to keep that as recurring articles, even if we probably want those to be a unknown issue. And I don't disagree. I think it's a good idea, even though technically they're sponsored by the town.
will the wording be sum of money, or will it be sum of zero?
I think those would be passed over.
Passed over.
Passed over by the town. I think it's a good idea to keep those in the consciousness of the public.
For Article 5, the fire detail.
Yes, in the one that I just distributed to you, the language does include a little bit different from town council, just the said funds to be under the spending authorization of the fire chief or his designee. Because even though it's sponsored by the Abington Celebrates Committee, obviously the fire chief directs the operations of the fire personnel, not a committee, that's the law, so. But, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
so I don't remember if I was on the committee the last time we had fireworks. I may have been, but I don't remember having to have an article for,
Well, the chief is concerned that because this is fairly late in coming to pass, late in the fiscal year, there was no provisions made, and he's just concerned, and he advised the leadership of the committee that for him to make provisions, this late within his budget.
Sean, do you remember if during the anniversary, if had that been just planned into the fire department's budget
No, I mean, the fire department didn't make provisions for details for this event.
previously?
No.
This is the first time.
Yeah, so whether or not the committee's fundraising can handle this was not it was certainly not something that, when this warrant was put together, was.
So do you remember how it was handled
I
then?
can't remember. No, I certainly can't remember.
Just a general discussion for the group here. It's a nominal sum, $4,500, but for me, that's the principal. We just got done talking about end-of-year budget transfers, and since this is impacting 2019 for the fiscal year, why raise and appropriate $4,500? Why not just say, hey, if at the end of the year you're short the $4,500 to cover this difference, then we'll talk about it.
That's certainly an option.
To kind of incentivize.
What is,
I think
what is
that's
the
a-
date of the event?
It's June.
Oh, it's June, it's this year, it's this fiscal year.
That was.
Yeah, so does it, what, he doesn't believe he has $4,500
Well,
at the end?
Well, again, keep in mind, the date of this warrant was, you know, the cutoff of this warrant was April, I think, 16th. At the time, you know, for him to commit to the leadership of this committee when they were organizing this, you know, at some point before that at the end of the fiscal year, he was going to have detail money.
Sure.
It would have been a little irresponsible, so I'm sure that a gentleman's agreement with the finance committee, he'd be very, I mean, you know Chief Nettle.
Yep.
Yeah, so to the extent that he would be very amenable to a gentleman's agreement on the subject.
We typically do end-of-year budget transfers in June or in July,
Late
so.
June.
Yeah, so that's my personal, no votes to that, I guess, but that's my
Sure.
personal opinion, is I would
Yep.
prefer not seeing it as a warrant
And I'll be happy to
article.
speak to him
I-
about that in the next couple of business days, and I, you know, he's a team player, they're all team players, that's not.
And that
But
was-
you can
That was
appreciate
more my reason
his,
for bringing it up.
his concern at the time, when you're talking about something this late in the fiscal year that he certainly hadn't planned for.
Right.
Yep.
Kind of, you know, irresponsible for him not to raise the concern.
Of course.
In other towns that have fireworks, does the taxpayers pay for the detail? Or does the people who, you know what I mean, like in Braintree, they have like the big 4th of July thing, does Braintree pay for the fire detail, or Braintree, whoever raises, you know what I mean? The-
Believe
Yeah,
It's a
raise fund.
fundraising, it's not paid for by the town. I used to
Right, so
provide-
how come we're paying for it?
Not sure.
In part, I suppose, was my support of Matt, was let's put that off and not make that particular vote to pay for it.
Should-
I
yeah.
don't, my understanding that the Abington Celebrates Committee didn't know until the last couple of days whether or not
Yeah, I
they were
think
even
they-
gonna have the capacity fundraising success to even hold the event, so I don't know. But I do know that if this happened, the chief was concerned of his department's ability to.
So we wouldn't hold them responsible to paying for the detail,
Well, again, that's.
if they're holding the event. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
That's
if
it.
you were holding a wedding, you would be responsible
Yeah.
for the detail yourself, so how come?
Fair enough.
Not that I'm saying we shouldn't have the
No,
fireworks,
I'm
I'm just
not.
saying, should the taxpayers
That's a very valid.
be responsible for it, or should they be responsible to pay the detail themselves
It's a
and
valid-
raise that money for it?
I-
valid point.
Just from what I know, I had just seen earlier today that, just today I saw it posted that they were,
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, they-
contract for review by the town manager.
Yes.
Pyro Vision Entertainment Group, so they must have just today.
They-
This is literally coming together, as Barbara points out.
Yeah.
by-
They have GoFundMe pages for people who wanna get nose jobs or something I think we could probably figure out as a community, maybe even a little bit to do it. I mean, again, I don't know if that's
And
what it is,
so-
but
So one of the things that makes it harder to compare, like you were saying, like Braintree with the fireworks, that's the town putting on fireworks, so the town would in that case be responsible for the detail. This is a private group, a private organization within the community putting on an event.
In their,
Branches is private too.
Ranges
Is
is
it?
private, because they fundraise, because they're every year when I used to live there, oh, we're not gonna have fireworks next year, we don't have enough money, but I mean, they also have a whole day fair, you know, they make money from
Yes.
that stuff.
But I think it's certainly a
I
good
just-
point that this is a decision that can be made at a later time when some of these other questions come together. I mean, again,
And-
fair enough, though, I think what you had is a committee going to the fire department, asking questions, and the chief being concerned about his department's ability to.
Right, but I'm wondering if they should
require
cover
public
themselves.
safety.
Well, that's my other question. To cover the Abington Police Department
And if these, as we just discussed last week, to the extent.
within their, able to cover it within their budget.
Right, with the
Yes.
police would have to detail like traffic and stuff like
On
that?
this post that went out, it says that the Abington Police Department and the Abington Department of Public Works are willing to cover the event within their annual budgets. The Abington Fire Department needs an additional $4,500 to oversee the event, and we are seeking to raise and appropriate the amount at special town meeting to cover that town service.
The other point, as you know, was raised last week, if these funds are not necessary, they revert back to the.
Right.
They just don't get spent.
They can't be spent elsewhere. So
Right.
again, as some of these details become clearer, then again, you'll be in a different position to make a recommendation over the next couple of weeks, so. That's a very, very valid points.
I just wondered about like the contract with the people, the company putting on the fireworks, right? Do you know if they
I haven't-
typically require you to have fire detail? Like, is that part,
I
would that
haven't
be
seen
part
it, but I
of?
would think that.
What do they provide?
Because I know at Braintree, or
To me,
like,
it
there's
wouldn't-
always the fire trucks are
Yeah.
always.
But I mean,
It
does it-
wouldn't be what they require, it would be
It would be
something
what the
we
fire
would.
department
Right, I'm just,
Absolutely.
but I'm just wondering if they, if that's something in, like,
Again, I
that they
haven't
also-
seen, we haven't seen a contract yet. Once we do, obviously, it's something that we want our public safety professionals to be reviewing very carefully, but whether or not they require it is irrelevant. The town should be requiring it, as well as the appropriate insurance information from the vendor, et cetera, so.
Just a quick question, the 4,500, did anybody outline out of that 4,500, like, what that cost was? Like, we need 3 firefighters,
Well,
5
that's what
police
the-
officers.
That's the number, that's the estimate the chief provided specifically. So
Okay.
He's the one who outlined what that would cover, the number of personnel, the time frame that would be required in that detail.
Okay.
So it came from him to the committee.
Further questions on that? Mine's clear. So that brings to 6 and 7, which we are likely to pass over.
Right, again, to the extent that the community town is inclined to be supporting the full-day kindergarten recommendation, then presumably 6 and 7 would be passed on.
So the next question that leads to the next question I had. The major things that we had talked about with additions or potential additions to the budget, obviously the full-day kindergarten,
Yes.
which we were looking to seed with money out of free cash. We had talked about, there were, I believe, a couple other positions or partial positions that the school department had talked about when they were here, which I believe were not in the final budget, but I am not 100% sure, so that's part of my question. And the other part is the positions for the police department of half year. So if you could give us updates on those.
Well, the budget that you see includes a half-year funding, which is approximately $50,000 to fund the 2 additional police officers to restore the detective division for the second half of FY19. So that is maintained within the budget that you all have in front of you. So that would bring the overall staffing of the police department to what we call the high water mark of some date in the 90s, once those positions are completely filled. Which the current budget also absorbs those positions that had previously been filled through grant funding too. So And it has been the number one staffing priority of, the Board of Selectmen and well, me and the Board of Selectmen. So in addition to that, as you know, it also does include the funding for an FY19 requirement for the collective bargaining agreement. So that's on a percentage basis, yes, it looks aggressive. It's, significantly 5.5% over the current fiscal year. It is doing a lot, no question about it. That is essentially the only staffing, significant staffing increase in the school budget.
5.5%, explain that.
Police specifically or overall?
Well, no, I'm talking about in the
Okay.
police salary line. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Again, we're talking about
You see,
200,000 plus 50,000.
but
over and above the
it's not a
existing.
5.5% salary increase.
No, I'm
That's, I
talking
just want to
about-
make sure that you,
You're hitting me a softball and I just missed it. I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
The bottom line salary line item, no, it is going up approximately, 5, let me look at the exact, because it recognizes the absorption of positions that used to be funded by grants, the inclusion of funds for the collective bargaining agreement, which would technically be in its second year of funding,
Right.
as well as 2 positions for the second half of a fiscal year, which brings the department back to the funding levels that it used to be at, which again has been the primary staffing goal of the Board of Selectmen, 5.51% increase over the current fiscal year in total. So
I
that's
just want to make sure
that's
that
what-
we were clear that it
Thank
wasn't
you.
that the
It's not-
policemen were getting a 5.5%
No.
salary increase.
In 1 year, that is, thank you.
It's
Clarifying.
a
Correct, thank you.
whole bunch of different
It's
things
a-
that
Yes.
bump that salary line item up
Okay.
that amount.
And we're doing a half, right, half for 19, basically 2 guys for half the year?
That's correct.
So for 20, it's gonna be obviously 2 full, obviously,
Those positions would be correct, or would be absorbed over the full fiscal year at
Yep.
FY20, correct.
and obviously, we're not looking at the 20 budget, but that's
But we're
planning
thinking-
on it, correct,
we're
right?
thinking
Okay.
of, yes. In fact, that's,
Yep.
we're always thinking a couple fiscal years
Yep.
ahead. And that's, again, one of the reasons why, even if you look at these revenue sources, and we talked about this, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, it all becomes a little blurred to me. And, our estimated receipts are still what you could, significantly below last year's actuals, and our new growth estimate is significantly below last year's actual. We're cognizant of still trying to be reasonably conservative. Our estimate of state aid is somewhat below what the House Ways and Means estimate is. We're still using the governor's projection, his estimate. So we could, and if this were certain times in the last 20 years, when you almost had to project every dime you believed you could just to keep people working, we could do that, and without having to grovel to the Department of Revenue to make ends meet. But we're not, because we're thinking beyond FY19. So
Because part of that, is part of that next year, when you then have to fund those positions for the full
Full
year,
year.
both of them, you also will not have that chunk of money to start up a full-day kindergarten, because
No.
Well, actually,
Is
we
that-
expect Chapter 78 to almost fully replace with the influx of students from the full-day kindergarten, as well as the influx of students that have returned to the system from other districts, whether it's VOTEC or whatever. We will, at least what we are told from both the state as well as a private consultant who is the guru in this Chapter 70 business, that we will, the threshold we will be beyond now, based upon the Chapter 70 formula, we will be essentially increasing our Chapter 70 aid to within $50,000 of our seed money from free cash. So
So we get
will
that.
be creating a recurring revenue source that almost replaces our investment. So, but that doesn't mean that we're still not concerned. It is a little bit of a leap of faith, but, you know, do you live in fear over providing services, or that's there's no question that we're concerned about it, but it's, you know, if not now, when? If not now, when? That's our, you know.
So, in the.
If not us, who? If not now, when? Very profound.
You know,
Well, in my opinion, better now than when we're forced to do it and don't have a plan.
That's
Or not have the
also
money.
a valid, that's also, and I have to say, I've been educated this
Unfunded
past
state
year on the
mandates.
issue myself. I was not aware that most districts in the state are already offering, providing full-day kindergarten. I wasn't aware of that, so it's not my intention to spend more money on school districts. It's my money to keep school districts from spending money. I'm the first to tell Peter that, jokingly. So I certainly appreciate.
No, I was
you know,
at work, oddly enough, at
That's a
work.
joke. I hope
At
people
work this
don't
morning,
understand
I was
that.
talking with two coworkers, one of whom is a Abington resident,
Yeah.
another who lives in Walpole, and Walpole is working towards the same thing
Yeah, yeah.
right now, so.
Yeah, but you have a valid point, Barbara. At some point, this could be a state mandate, and it could be sooner rather than later. But I think the school administration has worked to get as much assurances as possible as to the Chapter 70 ramifications in FY '20 and beyond, to the extent that, you know, that we have as much comfort as we can that the one-time investment is going to reap a recurring revenue source for us. So, you know, my concern is, you know, our fixed costs, you know, health and other insurances have been reasonably under control the last couple of years with some of the decisions we've made. And, you know, we go through periods of significant inflation that we've been able to avoid the last couple of years, and we hope that we can maintain that. You know, we can, you can do a lot of other things if health insurance isn't at 16, 18%, you know, as an example.
Right.
Yes.
That's one example. So, you know, it seems like when it hits the fan, it all seems to come together at once, between state aid going south and fixed costs going north. And if we can avoid the perfect storm for a number of years, we get our feet underneath us with full-day kindergarten and some other factors, then we'll be doing okay, so.
So to the question of the half year for the police positions.
Yes.
If I remember correctly from all of the various discussions we've had, the plan was to bring in the second half of the year, an additional 2 officers to bring us up to what is current full staffing plus 2, at which point more tenured officers would become detectives.
That's what the chief would, I'm sure that would be the chief's plan, because, you know, new officers aren't ready to be detectives, correct?
If we are not at the current level of full staffing halfway through the year, these 2 positions obviously would still be available if we approve them
Correct.
in the budget. But if we're not able, like the chief was talking about, the issues that they have bringing in new staff members and getting positions filled and how long that can take, it is entirely possible that these positions could go unfilled for at least a portion of the half year that we're already looking at.
That could very well happen. I mean, there are filling positions, there are people that start in the academy and they don't finish. They don't make it through the academy, so, you know, some people, that's been an issue. You might have 2 or 3 people that begin a police academy and one doesn't make it. You've got to go through the process of calling for another list, and that takes time. So that's possible. That's very possible. So,
Because he was saying it takes months, right? Like
Yes.
3 to 6.
6 months, I think, was.
Yeah. I think he said 3 would be incredibly quick.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Now-
basically, it
So
needs to be
then-
done in January.
Yeah. Keep in mind that too, I think one of the positives of this police settlement is it does, increase the starting level pay significantly for our new recruits, and hopefully at some point in time that will make the town more attractive for new recruits. That's not gonna happen tomorrow.
That was one of the things I was gonna ask, because I know when we've talked with him, there have been issues of turnaround
Yeah.
or turnover.
Recruiting and retention.
And recruiting, so.
But once again, it doesn't happen, snap your fingers and it all. Word has to get out.
Yes.
Word has to get out, and people have to get on your list, which, that doesn't happen overnight. So this is gonna take a little time, unfortunately. But like anything, we do have to start somewhere.
So then to the question of the positions the school department.
Yeah, I have to confess, I would not want to represent, school department staff. I can do my best to get you answers. That's the best.
I just wasn't sure because I know they referenced new positions, that it was not clear if they were funded in the budget or if they were in the requested budget, not the town manager budget.
Yeah, no, and, we don't micromanage their budget process. We try to set parameters, and they try their best to live within those. And they have, as you know, an internal budget process, and they're working hard, and they're just about there, getting down to a 3% growth factor over the current fiscal year. And they, during our financial officers group, FOG, which is very apt, they are within, I think they were about 3.12%, and working to get down to the 3% to meet that goal. And they give us occasional updates on how they're working to get there, but I would not represent well how apologize for that.
No, it's okay.
I have a question about the police that I just thought of, and I probably should have asked the chief, but I'm wondering about the detectives. Is that a position you get promoted to, like lieutenant or chief, or is it like just a job title that's independent of your rank? Is it a rank?
I think your question, if I'm interpreting it correctly,
Is it a rank?
is it a rank
Yeah.
or is it a description?
It's an assignment, not a rank.
It's an
It's
assignment.
an assignment, so
So-
you could
Be
be.
assigned as a detective at
Correct.
whatever rank you were
Oh,
at, so it would
correct.
So they
not,
could
So you don't
put
make more
anybody.
money.
so it would not
necessarily.
impact pay structure.
Correct.
Okay.
But they,
Or that, I should say, yes.
No, I thought that was different. I
You-
thought that was
you
a
could get
detective
it.
stipend.
You could, well, again, that's right, but it's not a permanent assignment like, that comes, with, a rank is a permanent,
Right.
condition.
Yes.
That comes with a permanent, what you'd say, pay.
Step.
Detective is more of an assignment where you would get, like I said,
stipend.
a stipend type thing, which it could go away when you get reassigned.
so it doesn't depend on your rank, they can put anyone in there. I'm just
You could-
wondering,
you
do
could.
they have somebody that's in line to be able to do that? They must, right?
Yeah, well, there are people qualified,
Yeah.
but once again, I don't,
I believe he,
I don't wanna speak for, exactly who, I'm not gonna mention names anyway.
Yeah,
but-
well, he
But
was.
there are people, I know that there are people that are qualified,
Mhm.
to be, at least one that I know of that's qualified to be a detective, but there are obviously some level of training
Yeah,
before somebody would be specifically assigned to that. But people that are seasoned and qualified to go through the training process, within the department.
the chief was talking about promoting from within, so I just wondered how that came about.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you wouldn't hire from another department, you wouldn't a detective. You definitely hire from within, and, you know, and fill those slots from within new recruits that would take those people's places, yeah. So that's the goal. And what, the other thing too that we talked about that has been raised by other members of the finance committee over time, and some people not on the finance committee, is, you know, whether or not you'd want to hire one detective for the full year in theory. And I know when the chief was in, and he spoke, also discussed that with others, that, you know, having two detectives at one time, he thinks is more effective than there's two people who can work together is more effective than just having one, ideally. So, in light of the other challenges in terms of getting the other positions staffed, it's probably more realistic to think that would happen in that fashion anyway. So.
Is that the only position they have that's assigned?
No, the court prosecutor is assigned.
School resource officer.
School resource officer, thank you. Yeah. Good point,
Barbara, did you have a question?
I did. I just was curious where we're at with the board of, with a board of health.
Health agent
Agent.
begins on May 9th.
Okay, and that's within the salary line? We
Correct.
kept that salary,
You
okay.
can't be quick enough. Although the staff has really done a great
Mhm.
job in the absence of
What was the date on
May
that?
9th.
May 9th. So a week from
Next
today?
week.
Yes, yes. Sure, you will appreciate meeting him, and very much look forward, because it's when you have vacancies, particularly for so long, you realize how much people know.
Quick question too, kind of along those lines, just more curiosity factor. The waste collection contract, is that a yearly contract, or do we have like a 3-year with them?
Yeah, it was a 3-year with the option to renew for two individual 1-year extensions. So right now, we're into our first of 2 individual 1-year extensions.
Okay. And it was like a 3.5% increase?
Well, it's a cost of living, so
That's
it's
it, yeah.
approximately that, correct. Or I'm sorry, not cost of living, a consumer price index, yes.
Okay.
So going back to full-day kindergarten, just briefly, because Dr. Tyler has not been here for a few of the meetings that we discussed that at, I was interested in his perspective on the idea of not putting money into stabilization and OPEB and instead seeding the full-day kindergarten program.
So hearing Rick's point earlier with regards to sustainability, and so I'm going to give you a very long answer. Ready? Here's the piece.
Shocking, yes.
Well, here's the concise piece. As I grappled with it, I was ideologically opposed to a couple of the premises behind full-day kindergarten. Not for any other reasons beyond I heard in the community folks saying, well, geez, kindergarten is the new first grade. Well, then where does it stop? Where does it start? Why not put the energy into better primary seating and better secondary school, give greater opportunities for IB versus AP, create better opportunities for those who are going to be positioned. That's one argument that I heard, and that was just me saying I have to be contrarian. Second piece, I'm a property owner. I'm a homeowner here in the community. I like having my property values go up. I like having a well-educated and well-heeled place for folks to come into. I like giving opportunities to everyone, regardless of make or model, race, color, creed, ethnicity, financial ability. Give everybody a fair shake, which I think is the mantra behind full-day kindergarten. Give everybody equal footing. Give an opportunity for academic retention of key and core principles, blah, blah, blah. Sustainability is a key piece for me. Can you sustain it, yes or no? So it's one thing to want something, it's another thing to actually be able to afford something. So that's where I struggle, and I struggle when I saw Article 6 and 7, because I'm not a professional governmental financial manager. I've just been on this board historically for an awful long time. And what that,
Historically is the good word.
what that means to me is that it's a non-sustainable or non-viable until you have those confirmations of commitment that the Chapter 70 formula is going to take into account the current needs of the community based on what you're expanding. If we have that confirmation, then I, honest to God, think it's great. But somebody has to fund it in some way, shape, or form. If not, there is a whole bunch of possibilities, and those possibilities do come into what is the levy limit, what is the way to support an operating budget, is it smart to support an operating budget on anything that would be an override, not that that has ever been suggested by anybody. Can you afford capital? And I go back to the earlier budget hearings where we talk about, geez, the police department's always going to need cruisers because we always need to have mobile police officers. We're going to have the needs for replacement equipment, whether it's DPW or at the fire department or the library or whatever capital library needs, I don't know. But the point is that if you don't have a means to sustain your government, then I don't know what it does to your bond rating. I don't know what the long-term impact is going to be to the debt service and the cost of the debt that we currently have, because you're not contributing money. So the bond review is going to change, right? Because you didn't put a penny in, and when your rating bureaus look at you with
I
a,
don't know, I think I asked that question. If we don't put money into stabilization, what does that do to our bond rating?
so to answer that, those are all of the things that I have contemplated and considered as it relates to full-day kindergarten. The premise of it all is, kids need to be kids and they need to be positioned well so they can succeed later. But I don't think that eliminating childhood at the age of 4 or 4.5 is a smart thing for us to do just as a society. That's my own personal opinion. I equally believe that first, second, third, fourth should be given greater opportunities to expand their horizons and learn better. To me, which means you invest in the core curriculum, you invest in those avenues, not force kids to go to school earlier. I don't know that that solves the problem. That's just my own personal opinion. My concern rests with the sustainability and the financial sustainability. If somebody answers that question and says, Sean, no, it's a thing. Like if you actually budget in for full day kindergarten, the Chapter 70 formula is going to wash out in the following way, and the funding will increase this amount, and the town should plan to contribute X amount of dollars each year over year, notwithstanding any collective bargaining increases or other. And I'll say, great, Rick has already contemplated the unfunded pension liability issues, has already funded or contemplated the healthcare costs, has already thought about all those other things. We as a town, make my property value go up, keep the community successful, let's go forward and do that. That's money well spent and invested. That is my opinion.
May I comment?
Absolutely.
I agree completely with you. The part that scares me is that history has shown that as the economy goes, so goes the state's commitment to funding what today is it acknowledges as its obligation. However, if we build our to what extent can we drive our values on that today? And if you plan for that, we would never do anything. My other thing is, we can't, we start a process, scared to death about our fixed costs. Our fixed costs, we go through periods, as you know, that can preempt almost anything else. We've got them reasonably under control for the last several years. At some point, those can essentially drive the ship and keep anything else from happening. Ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, you get the perfect storm of out of control fixed costs, state aid that's flat or declining, and these service demands or service policy decisions that we committed to. We're now in a mode of we're reducing these services that we committed to, and that is a very difficult situation. We spend more on unemployment, we're laying people off, we're making some horrible decisions, and we've gone through that before. I I've gone through that before, some of you have been in situations like that. You know, either through in the governmental process or in the private sector. That's not where we want to be, but on the other hand, do you do nothing? Or do you try to provide service? And, my role isn't one of a policymaker, I'm a bureaucrat, I don't make value decisions on behalf of your community. I try my best to try to make those policy and values work within the construct that I'm dealing with. So my mentality is similar to yours, because and I try to remind people of a lot of what you're saying, and try to plan ahead. But
Rick, if I may, just with that point, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, just
Absolutely.
one modest addendum. In the pursuit of being accretive to the quality of services you're providing, right? We're looking to build and make it more valuable. Are we not being dilutive for all the reasons that you just cited? So we're taking away from someone else or risking taking away because we just don't know. We have a great school system today. We've invested in the infrastructure of the school system today. We produce graduating classes that get admitted to Ivy League on full merit scholarships. We produce opportunities for kids with creative in their sports, etc. So the question is that for me, in the absence, I would love to be a creative and grow the program. Add the value to it's wonderful. But I think it's personally, for me, I would be foolhardy to take away from somewhere else, because I might have a robust school system, but if I indeed close my library, or if I have to, I'm giving you a history, I'm giving you a hyperbole for the subscriptions of, because we've been sitting at this table across from yourself and your predecessors, we've had these legitimate conversations as we're going to shrink the hours of the library. We'll risk, because we didn't have enough money, and we're looking to fund core services. This is, of course, 2008, when we had TARP funding and worried about how that crap is going to come in and what is that going to mean to our community
Completely
services.
unfunded for Park and Rec.
Exactly right. So, exactly. So in those examples, you can't predict, like, I wasn't smart enough to figure out that we were going to have a housing crisis because of all these derivatives, blah, blah, blah. That aside, I would love to add value to the community. I just want to make sure that as we add value to the community, that people do indeed caveat emptor. They know exactly what they're doing. And 5 and, as far as 6 and 7, should be scary because it doesn't give answers. It's an exclamation point and then a question mark. And it's not because there's all the other personal ideologies I've already shared, just ultimately it's for the community, right? What's best for the community. So the, historically, looking at, there was a Patriot Ledger article from 2017 that said, geez, you have 55, out of 317 school districts in Massachusetts, you have 55 full-day programs, right? So of those 55, you had 12 on the South Shore. There were only 3 or 4 that were funded by the communities. They were large metropolitan communities, right? Quincy City, Quincy being one of them. Has a population of nearly 100,000 folks, has a budget that makes ours, we're rounding error, right? And I think to myself, well, geez, look at the neighboring communities, and I think, are we trying to keep up with the Joneses? Are we trying to invest in our community, and what are we truly doing to invest in our community? I'm proud that we built a big school. It's a fantastic school. It's a great investment for the community going forward. Is today the smartest time to invest in that full-day kindergarten, since there really are sustainability questions? Because it's not just if we build it, they're going to come, sure, but can we afford it? And if we can't afford it, then why have a big building that you have to shutter? Why have all these things that you possibly have to cut down?
I think that was the biggest question last week, or the week before, was the whatever this,
Chapter 70.
yeah, that, and, so that was like the match, right?
that's the statement.
Yeah, so, but is there, I mean, that's a great question he's asking. I think we asked it before in a different way. He asked it way better. Is there something that says, if you have 200 kids or whatever, you're gonna get X amount?
It's the state formula is, dictates what that reimbursement's going to be, yes.
We just don't know if they'll cut
The question
that
is
formula.
what happens when the state budget isn't
Changes
as
their
robust as it needs to be. Does state aid to communities is that on the chopping block.
Yeah, and then the last one was the bond, because we asked that about the bond, if you don't put money away, you said the bond rating would be different.
Yeah, it's hard to measure that. I mean, our bond rating was increased in the last couple of years, just before we bonded for the school, and it was reauthorized at the same level when we just bonded for some water pipes. So we're not anticipating any large borrowing anytime soon, which is good.
But by not,
And that's when your bond rating becomes important, but, so, I don't know that taking a year off from putting money in stabilization is going to have any significant or any impact on your bond rating, but it's certainly a valid question, but, I think if
But
we-
so I think
if we
it's-
were
if we-
using money from our stabilization to fund one-time operations, that would be more of a.
but I think to Sean's
I mean,
point,
for
it's
current
if we're not funding, if we're unable to fund the stabilization and the OPEB this year, and
Yeah.
things
Keep-
change with Chapter
Sure.
70,
Right.
and it may not even be Chapter 70 that changes, it could be that
Yeah.
they cut us somewhere else that we have to make up for. And so then we might be in that position, what's the likelihood of us being in the position next year to not be able to fund?
Well, you gotta keep in mind a couple things. Number one, we're not funding OPEB and stabilization per se.
Putting money-
Yeah, those are savings accounts,
Right.
okay? And we have, I wanna be careful. We are relatively conservative with our such things as estimated receipts and new growth, that there's somewhat of a comfort level that if state aid wasn't as robust next year as FY '20, that we have somewhat of a cushion in terms of funding recurring expenses. My concern would be if our, fixed costs go through the roof, like I said, the perfect storm. We're not well, the perfect storm for a year or two. Abington is not a town that has the revenue stream to deal with the perfect storm for a couple of years. That's the problem. And I don't know that many towns are, to be honest with you. That's the problem. Thinking ahead a year or two is one thing, but thinking, you look at some of those, some of those years in the 90s, 2 or 3 or 4 years, it was, and even even like you said, 10, 12 years ago, it was tough. It was tough. I mean, I wasn't in Abington, but it was tough everywhere. It was tough everywhere, so.
And how much
Once
is
again-
kindergarten?
Once again,
456? 456,000.
456 plus 100 I know it's 50 for the police, but half a year, but let's just say that's a full year, so that's 100. So 556 new, but Chapter 70, what do they say on the
They said it'd be
reimbursement on the
like
70?
400,000, I think,
It's
Yeah.
about 400. It's gonna be about within 50,000.
of what we,
of
the seed money.
so to speak. But again, that's the policy question. Do you not, you're never going to realize the projected state aid reimbursement if you don't get up over a certain threshold. So you take advantage of the opportunity or don't you? Whether, do you trust that the state aid is going to be what it's projected to be as per the Department of Education and, again, the third-party consultant who's done the math with the school administration? And if you do trust, God help me, if you do trust the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and sometimes I tell people there's nobody more cynical about state and federal government than people who work in local government, but maybe I shouldn't be saying that publicly, but if you do trust what the Department of Education is telling us, and if you do trust what, again, our third-party analyst is telling us, there's an opportunity that that ultimately doesn't constitute a huge outlay after the initial investment.
So,
But none of us truly knows the future here.
When would we know?
so the belief.
Yeah, after
We would know
you
about a year-
invest.
We would know about
Yeah.
a year from now if the state is honoring the commitment to Chapter 70 funds that we're being told that we would be eligible to receive.
So the belief of both the Department of Education and the consultant that the
Yes.
school is working with is that doing this would put us over the threshold.
To make us eligible, yes. That would bring enough students into the district to put us up over a threshold, population threshold, that we're not at right now, even with some students coming back to the
We're
district.
not at, but we are apparently
We're
close to.
close to, and that the full-day kindergarten would bring us over the threshold to make us eligible for. So, again, it's, you know,
I was asked for one opinion, my opinion, so
Oh,
I share my, I still have a modest degree of skepticism.
Yeah.
But my skepticism aside, it really does come down to a couple of points. I think, I saw, I was looking over at Greg's pile of paper because I was envious, but he had the social tech, the social tech budget in there. And I think the social tech budget is telling to me when we do start talking about the prognostication as to if we build it, are they gonna come? And you're seeing, I believe Abington's enrollment has decreased. And there are reasons why. So does that mean that we add full-day kindergarten, we're gonna shift families into the community? Who knows? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't have any crystal ball. Candidly, my concerns will only exist, the school infrastructure, do we buy a new fire truck and have to build a new fire station? That was a question we asked Chief Nuttall when he was buying the tower unit for the high-rises in the community. The infrastructure in the school, but the next point would be is, I honestly don't know the answer to this, and I apologize for being absent if you guys already asked this question of the treasurer collector, which would be is, in the communities that run a funded full-day kindergarten, what has been the longitudinal impact on property values? Because there's a logical statement to suggest that if your average median home price, and I don't know, at least if you know at the top of your head, it was like $389 or something like that. I don't know what to refer to you, because I think you were on a,
Yeah, that sounds right, but I can't say.
So, but if the median home,
Somewhere in that ballpark.
if the median home value increases, then by definition, you're increasing the amount of cash received from local receipts by the community, because property taxes, you're not raising it, right, you're still bound by the levy limit, but, 5% of
Appraisals.
$400,000 is different than 5% of $389,000.
375.
375. So if we knew, it had a sense. So to me, if I'm someone selling to me, hey, Sean, we looked at it. This is what's right for the community as sustainability. This is how we're gonna fund it. We're gonna take $500,000 from these two funds. It's a one-time investment. We are confident that we're gonna get over the limit. This is why we're gonna get over that threshold, so we're gonna get the reimbursement. It'll be self-supporting, sustaining, and by the way, here's the value back to the community who doesn't actively have children in the school system and who don't necessarily participate in those services, but it's going to enhance your property values. And what does that ultimately mean? It means new unraised taxes for you, right? It's new value of cash coming in because your property is now worth $500,000. Does that stink? Yeah, I guess it does, but it doesn't stink on the other hand if I'm looking to sell my property later. So those, right, there are how many pillars do you guys, in the municipal world, you have how many pillars of a community? And schools represent the largest one, right? So that's, my position really remains unchanged. It comes down to the sustainability. If it's sustainable, then I think it's great because of all the reasons that I just cited. I don't know if you guys got that feedback from the treasurer collector or if the school department did that work through the treasurer collector, because to me, that's the source of truth. Treasurer collectors know, frankly, what property values are and what they're able to raise based on property values. So you had 55 communities in the Commonwealth already as of October that were running full-day kindergartens. It shouldn't be hard to figure out what has been the impact, because property values were X, and there are other factors, I understand. But let's just try to take a non-correlated assessment to say, this is what the positive impact was. That's the driver for me, is yes, we'll have opportunities for children, we'll have opportunities for all walks of life, again, regardless of their financial means, again, race, color, creed, et cetera. Everyone has a fair and open opportunity. Wonderful. I think it's silly to try to educate kids so young, so often. I think you should invest when their minds are the most formative. That's my opinion. Invest in your elementary school, invest in your middle school, invest in your high school. But it's gonna help the community be better, right? So sustainability, I started with, that's what I end with, and it would have been nice to know the anticipated values. This is what the impact would be, not a forecast showing your property is gonna go up. It's more so a statement of, we looked at it, and this could be one of the beneficial outcomes. Because on the same token, we could not get the population of students. Or on the same token, you could have 3 sped kids come in that have a high value requirement that move into the district as of July 1, that you're now paying a lot of money for, that is going to then push us over the limit even further. There are all these what ifs. It could
Sure.
rain cats and dogs.
Would that kind of information from the treasurer be something that could be looked into if we have it in the next week?
Or at
Before
least,
the next meeting.
like, do we need
He's letting us know. if-
300 kids in kindergarten to hit this threshold? Do we need 7? You know what I mean? Like, is there sort of a,
I can ask the superintendent, what full the extent of the analysis they've already done.
Yep.
Uh,
Obviously, we're not
Yeah.
looking for the treasurer to do a full assessment of all of the towns that have have gone to full-day kindergarten and the property values of each of those towns between now and next Wednesday.
But aren't
Just
they,
looking for if that's information that has been looked at, if it could be provided to us, if it has not been specifically looked at, if there is a general
Yes.
knowledge
Yes.
about the communities that have gone to
Right.
full-day.
Honestly, this is what comes back in my head. Hope is not a plan. So if we can all jump, if we all jump because we have that knowledge.
I'll ask the question of the treasurer and of obviously the school administration.
Yes.
Because obviously it's, but, once again, I don't my role, I think, is one of trying to facilitate the needs and goals of the policy makers of the town, to the extent that it's practical. Whether or not this particular goal is nearly one of dollars and cents selling a home, it's a question. That's a question for the policymakers.
I don't think that was the question.
Disrespect, sure.
No, that's not, no, I want us to stand down for 2 seconds. I just didn't usurp this for a moment. That wasn't the statement. The statement was an investment in a community. When you invest $1 into a student in the community, you're investing in the community as a whole.
And the property
So,
values, I.
The only way to fund those students is through property values. If the property values plummet because we opt to defund our police department and run 1 car and the sergeant's at a desk, I'm confident we're gonna have plummeting property values. If we defund our library fully, you're gonna see that.
Right, but as you know, the way Proposition 2.5 works, if property values go down, the tax rate goes up. It's not like that, it's not
Yeah.
as if
Yeah.
the gravy train stops coming, so to speak.
No, I understand that, but the values of the properties will go down. You can still have your levy limit, it's a really crazy circle.
Sure.
So this isn't just silly.
But I will ask the question, I understand.
It's a value to the community, it's investment in the community. You say, hey, Mr. Tyler, you're 46, your daughter's 20 years old, she's not in the school system, why are you so interested in funding this project? I'm funding it because I invest in my community.
I understand what you're saying, and I know you're trying to help, because realistically, it's hard to believe an investment like that in the education system can anyway hurt the value of the community. I understand that. So whether or not the proponents, the chief proponents, have done that type of analysis already, or if they've asked the treasurer for information, or Jack Pistorino for any information to assist with that already, they haven't. So I'll pose the question in the morning, so.
Thank you. Please.
I was just gonna say that, aren't the calculations of all the money involved based on the number of current half-day students going to full-time and the number of full-time students that won't be paying tuition, and then the number of kids mostly transferring back into the district that are currently going to whatever, VOTEC or charter schools or whatever? They said 110 kids will be coming back. Isn't that what all the money's based on currently?
That-
Yeah.
They
There
have a
were-
good idea how many kids will be in full-day kindergarten.
Yeah, there were several factors in what got them to the 450 number.
Yeah.
One of it was the current kindergarten students who are paying for.
Right, the full
half-
day,
Who are
and then
paying
how
for a
many
full
half
day,
would
the
go
fees that are
full.
paid, and they were looking at the average over several
Yeah.
years, not just the current year, of the amount that they came up with of fees that would no longer be paid to the town
Yeah.
because of not charging a fee for full-day kindergarten.
So they're fairly
But
certain
then
of
also the number of students who were not previously full-day kindergarten that would become full-day kindergarten.
the numbers are fairly certain, it's just a matter of Chapter 70 funding.
It's just a matter
Yes.
of the state's,
So the amount,
Yeah.
and to Dr. Tyler's point, the amount that we would get back in future years' budgets to cover the expanded cost of having full-day kindergarten is really what the question is. And to the point of where having full-day kindergarten could hurt the value of a community, it's if we can't fund it. That's the only place where it could hurt the value of the community.
presumably, if the state doesn't renege on its Chapter 70 commitment, and again, that's
And that's always a question
That's-
whether we have full-day kindergarten or not.
exactly.
Correct.
Exactly. And again, that's a
It's-
concern.
It's
of-
really a question
that's
of
a con-
adding more to what we are looking for from the
The
state.
concern of whether that's a good way of putting it, because a concern for people in my position has always been whether or not the state is going to honor its commitment to local government and local aid every year, regardless of whether it's full-day kindergarten or anything else, and that's, it's,
And
Keeps you up at night.
and as we all know, there are lots of things that over the years, the state has chosen to no longer honor their commitment to
or
the municipalities.
or limit, you
Correct,
may
to
fund.
decrease.
You may fund a mandate at a certain percentage as opposed to the 100% that is even in the law.
As
an
the
example.
towns that entered
Bless you.
into the Community Preservation Act earlier
That's a good point.
can attest, they were receiving a dollar for dollar match. The match is now somewhere more, one for every $4 or $5.
But that was set up in advance, that's not news to anybody, that.
Well, no, but
Predetermined.
yes, my point is, over the years since that was set up, the percentage, like the match from the state
Yeah.
has continued to
Yeah.
decrease,
I mean, we'd like to think of things like Chapter 70 as more sacred.
more stable.
However, both politically and financially sacred, but it hasn't always been the case during severe economic downturns.
Yes.
It has not always been the case, which is why, there is a leap of faith on this, there's no question about it.
And it's why we generally as a board, and why you generally as a town manager to this point, have tried to be conservative fiscally in times of not financial distress.
Can I ask a question about that? The conservative, right? I mean, it's great because we end up having I don't know why I sound like I'm 90. We end up having.
Look at Dave over 85.
Yeah, sure, thanks. We end up having money in the bank, whatever, but is it then tougher to make this decision because we're literally kind of splitting hairs because it looks like we don't really have as much money as maybe could be there?
No,
I've been sitting here sort of thinking about that for a couple of weeks. I think it's good to be conservative, but
No, to me, it's just the concern about recurring funds beyond the current fiscal year. It's beyond FY19, looking at FY20. Will we have the recurring revenue to fund the full-day program? That's really, to me, is really
So
as simple as it gets. As
Just
simple as it
to
gets.
kind of put it as simply as I can, if we were looking at so we're looking right now at a sort of, at what we're calling seeding cost of $450,000. If we were looking at a year-to-year recurring cost of $450,000, we wouldn't be having this discussion, because that's not something that we even with less conservative projections and budgeting, that we would be looking to add to the budget at this time. If we're looking at it as seeding where there's money coming back and the cost, the recurring cost is more in the range of $50,000, that's something we believe that moving forward we would be able to absorb. So the question is, if we trust in that recurring cost, and ideologically, are we comfortable with not putting money into our savings accounts?
And can we say yes and then 3 or 4 months later pull back no?
The question is, can we say yes and then for fiscal year 20, pull back and say no if things change, 20 or 21 or whatever, is really more, because we cannot, once we have placed the funds, like the funds and in the line items in the budget,
Yeah.
that's what they're set at.
But then you'd be laying people off, and then it's gonna end up a department against
Absolutely.
department situation.
Absolutely. And that's why we're having the discussion.
Can I ask like a really weird, like completely utter lame question for a second? And I promise you it's weird and lame. And this is a fall STM type question. The school budget is a school budget. Article 6 and Article 7 have cash in it, right? We don't actually put any earmarks into full-day kindergarten, but we say that the school will run full-day kindergarten. And we'll fund it in the special town meeting in the fall. And the reasons to do, but just again, this is the lame, I'm not, by no way saying this is a good idea.
Yeah.
The purpose at hand is, do the enrollment numbers come? Right? We'll see the enrollment numbers. We're gonna fund it regardless. We're just gonna hold funding into the special town meeting and to fund the remainder part of the school budget. And the reasons to do so would be only to buyer beware, everybody. We believe that we're gonna have the total enrollment. We believe that we're gonna have this Chapter 70 piece, but we're just putting it out there to say that we're willing to fund it, we're willing to actually put this investment into it. We just truly wanna see, come September 1, when school starts, do you actually have that enrollment? You're gonna get the money in October if we run a special town meeting in October. We're gonna fund it to that point. Any way you slice it, we're putting money in, we're taking money out, and that very well may be a bad idea, I don't know. I personally would argue to capitalize it because it's an investment in the infrastructure of the community, but what do I know? But it holds the whole notion of accountability. We're all giving equal risk. What's the difference between doing it now and then? The biggest difference, frankly, is we're all on notice, we're all on edge saying, did we get the numbers? Which we can't control. We're not going to recruit people from other towns saying come in, but we have a forecast knowing that we're gonna get an enrollment.
But then if you don't get the numbers, then what?
Then you don't have to fund it for next year.
So that's, so
And what happens to
you're
the
gonna try
teachers
and
that you
find, right, you're
hire
gonna try and
and-
find people to work for 1 year.
Yeah, no, I get it, but that's the equal risk. Trust me, I didn't,
can-
I
I can
promise you, I
ask
didn't
that-
say it was a good idea.
I
I
can-
Money to pay them.
didn't say it was a good idea at all.
Hopefully, you've gotta get them, not just for 1 year, you gotta get them about a day. You don't
Right.
have teachers at all, and
If we don't
Well,
fund
and
it, right, yeah, because
so,
we wouldn't be able to
like,
pay
kind
them.
of playing devil's
right?
advocate, or
I like it.
looking at, you know, different.
Volunteer position.
How would you do it differently, and not that way?
Yeah, I didn't say it was a good idea.
Would you, no, so would you suggest waiting another year until that money comes into the town?
but it's not coming into the town.
Right. But so- Until, how would you do it?
Right, the rub of the situation is, we won't know if we have the numbers until we spend the money. We won't know if the numbers matter until a year later.
Numbers as student-wise?
Right,
They-
and that,
they-
the first, we
that's
won't
what I'm-
know if we'll definitely have the numbers to reach the Chapter 70 threshold until we say yes and fund full-day kindergarten. And then even if we have the numbers, we won't know what the state return will be until after we definitely have the numbers, which is after we fund it.
Or would you be
And
suggesting?
if we don't
to-
fund it, we won't have the numbers, and
Yeah, we don't fund it.
Chapter
right away.
70
Well,
won't
that goes
change.
back to the policy point that you were stating, right? So to answer your question, Barbara, I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that, because I don't know that I would do it, right?
I'm saying, if you were going to, how
Sure.
would that play out for you? Would that be something that you'd say, make that a capital plan and invest that 450,000 when we have that?
No, so if, it's like here, it's the policy decision's been made, we're gonna move forward. The challenges that I would ask is in the sales pitch would have been different, and that's just style point, I suppose. I would have said this is the value to the 5 pillars of the community. Because we're not just investing in the schools, we're investing in all aspects of the community. This is what education brings to the community. That indeed was the sales pitch for the new school building that we all voted on. It wasn't just investing in a big building and we're not just getting free money from SBA. It was an investment in the community and there was an increase in property. Right, so that was the whole purpose with me saying that back, is that wouldn't it have been nice to have that data, not just saying, we should do it, fair and equal access, it makes a lot of sense, other cool kids are doing it, let's be a cool kid. That doesn't make sense to me. So to that point, you've already answered a lot of questions. I mean, as Lisa just pointed out, you already have forecasted numbers that were validated, and here's the reasons why they believe it. You have a full-day kindergarten program in a parochial setting that's full, that's paid. Those people very well, they're Abington students that are likely going to come into Abington.
Now, in fairness, you're having a very, you're having a discussion on a subject without the right people in the room to some extent either.
Very Dukakis of you.
You know?
Right, people aren't at the table. I get it, no, but just, well, it's the knowledge.
Which is what we
I mean,
typically
again,
do
you
when
know,
we're
I know,
going over.
I know that without the, you know, the administration and at least one, if not a couple members of the school committee who had done a lot of homework on the subject. And they may not be able to answer the specific questions you pose, but there are better people that certainly than me to answer some of the questions and the pose. That's
No doubt, but I think honestly, Greg, Renee, Lisa, Barbara, Matt are, to me, the best sources, because they've already gone through a lot of the data, and they're hearing my opinion for the first time, but they also have other areas that they're able to contribute, and that's, some of the questions are questions, like, geez, you know, what is the true value to the community, and as I said, if it's sustainable, you're right, you can't predict sustainability, who knows what the lottery cash is gonna be in 2020, God only knows, but we know we rely on it as part of our local aid. Okay, great. If we have the cash and the policy folks and the community believes that the only stumbling block is going to be, will Chapter 70 let us down, yes or no? Well, it will let you down, one. Two, you will get some money back so long as you hit that threshold of enrollment. So you always have the risk of when enrollment drops, I point to the social tech, enrollment will drop. You're going to see ebbs and flows of folks. And as long as everybody's okay with that, I mean, I'm still entitled to my opinion, if everybody's okay with that, I think you invest in, I don't invest in the police department because I just love the police department. I don't invest in the fire department because I just love the fire department. I invest in the community. And I say, how do we distribute that? I've talked about seniors, I've talked personally, seniors, library, public safety, and schools, 5 community pillars. Okay, so if it's great, I mean, Greg offered some valuable points, Barbara's offered valuable points. I'm stuck on the sustainability piece only because time has been the best talisman for me as to how the state has behaved. We've argued about Chapter 70, whoever the representative has been, whether it's Kathy, whether it's Jeff, whether it's whoever's next, it's always been, tell me what's going on with Chapter 70. How does Hingham get a big bump and we don't? What's going on? Some of it's school enrollment, some of it's the population base, right? Because we don't have same programs. That's the whole point. So that's it. So history does demonstrate that you're gonna see ebbs and flows. But if you have the cash and you want to invest it, you don't put money in there, okay, it's a capital investment. That's how we'd look at it. We're spending a lot of money on a capital investment, investing in that one pillar of the community. There is risk. So as we expand services, we expand government, there's a risk. So if for me, it would have been nice to know, as you make this investment, the ROI is going to come back in the following. Tangible and untangible. The tangible is going to be in the communities that invested in full-day kindergarten, they saw an appreciable value shift in their property values. Why does it matter? Because it sustains the whole community, not for Tyler looking to sell his house. Right, just being clear on that one. The second piece is the intangible. You give fair and equal access to everybody in your community such that they have an opportunity to achieve, because they're the ones taking care of us in 18 years. I fully appreciate that. I keep going back to, because I was missing one key piece, right? 5 pillars, how does this one pillar support the other 4? So to answer your question, okay, let's do it. I'll take the risk, I'll take the gamble. I'm not sitting in his seat, and I'm an appointed guy.
I'm trying to look at it from all angles and say that,
Forget it.
you know,
No, but he makes the good argument of a couple things that we asked, right? Now, if the bond rating doesn't change, if we don't have money in there, that's another one I think is important, because what if we wanted to borrow next year for something big? I don't know, the guy was I don't remember all their names, but the fire guy said they needed new fire trucks. So all things that we were saying down the line, right? So, for me, I think it's the same thing. How does it affect it going forward? If they had an idea that property values went up by 0.2 in some of these places, or it looks like the majority of them, it actually was a good thing because X happened, that would help. Only because, it would just probably make a decision a little easier, or at least a little bit more palatable for everybody who doesn't have a kid maybe going to in kindergarten. I have 2. I think it's great, but I also think we have to pay for it like we just paid for the last 2 years, or it is what it is.
So Craig has a conflict of interest.
Exactly. So, but but literally, it's, and I'm sure a lot of people can't do that. They can't pay for the kids' kids. So I think it's great to be able to provide that service. So, but there are some questions that I do think, and I'm sure these people, I mean, if you have a consultant looked at it, there's no way they didn't look at these things. It would be impossible to not look at anything else that's ever happened.
His goal was the chapter 74 more specifically. That's what-
But even just talking about it, it's one of the things that would come up.
Yes.
He might not even have looked at it,
Right,
but he
and
might
for
be
the
able to get the
numbers, it's like, I
data
mean,
quicker than, you know what I mean?
Looking at kindergarten in general, there's a lot of full-day private kindergartens that people consider if you're working, that you would do that instead, and if it's free, free here, okay, you know what, then it makes my before and after school care more palatable, so I'll just send them to the public school, because I don't have to pay for that, whereas, you know what, I just have to drop off at one place, pay one dime, and I'm done. You know what I mean? So I wonder if the numbers, just like years past, if people in Abington had sent their kids to private kindergarten instead of ours, because you had to pay, and then in first grade our numbers went up a little bit, because then they came back. You know what I mean? Whereas you just keep them in the beginning, and that would make them. Does that make sense? Because
That's
I've thought about it. Like, you know what? If I have to pay this, now I have to pay for before, after school care, bus, and full day kindergarten. Is that worth my money, or am I better off sending my child to full day St. Bridget's, because they'll one-stop shop? You know what I mean? So I think.
Actually, that's a fantastic,
Yeah.
literally, we went through that exact same thing you just described. We went the same Bridget's routes for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, and as a working parent, that is, or Mary Deb, or, I mean, there's a lot of private kindergartens, and it's like, bus doesn't come till 9. Well, I work at 7:30, so I need somewhere that I can drop off at 7. You know what I mean? So, so I think maybe that would keep people in, so maybe they looked at those numbers as to keeping some of those kids.
Somehow the bus is free for me and not for you, by the way. We live close.
But yeah, but I mean, seriously, that's like a big cost.
Like this.
Yeah. I'll use your address.
Just put my address.
Yeah. But I wonder if that would bring, I mean, it's probably like 5 kids, but I mean, I guess if we're looking for a certain number, 5 is better than 0.
So I think moving forward with it,
I will
the
pose a
information
question
that
to
you
the
can
school
get.
administration and, and again, our internal financial people to see what analysis has been completed to date and see what can be provided. Like I say, I don't know the people who will be doing analysis
Right.
already, but what has been completed.
Right.
It's not something that's been provided to me, and I haven't asked for it either, but to the extent that people already may be preparing a sales pitch, I don't mean that in a cheesy way,
No.
please, I don't want
Absolutely.
anybody who's watching, I don't want to think of, but obviously, it's obviously.
So then the
If-
other sorry, Greg, the other question, and this one rather than to the town manager, is to the board, is do we feel we would need or want a representative from the school committee or school department at the meeting next week to answer any additional questions or any unanswered questions that we have?
guess I'm coming next Wednesday, so, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Okay.
And
Be able to
I'd be
arrange that?
happy to arrange that,
Thank you very much.
if, is this, if, for instance, they didn't get that information, is this somewhat public information that, I mean, I could have somebody get for me over the week?
Yeah, no, I wonder if you could Google like, oh, when we
That's what I mean.
do you know what I mean? Like, I
You could
feel like
call
that
another
might,
community and say,
or just has
when
it been
did you-
posted in a
or-
newspaper somewhere in Massachusetts? I mean, it might have been, because I know that there was an article,
try
the
to get
Patriot Ledger article referencing the full-day kindergarten, how the South Shore communities in general was so far behind the rest of the state, in terms of like free kindergarten. The South Shore,
It
there was like,
provided to me too at some.
I forget, I read it a long time ago, but it was like only like 2 South Shore communities out of like a certain number, as opposed to like, if you go to Western Mass, it's unheard of that it's not free full-day
Wouldn't the,
kindergarten. It was like something like
The
that.
assessor's
October
office
17th.
to possibly know how, the best place to locate that
No, I think
information for
80%.
like home values and, or would it be
Again,
that?
But I think the school committee said 80% of towns in Massachusetts had free full-day didn't they say something like that? or
According
no?
to,
Literally, Patriot Ledger today, October 2017, their article, they only said 55 communities out of 317 school districts
I
had.
swear they told us when Peter Schaefer
No,
was
when
here.
Peter was here, he said
80% of
80%.
Massachusetts, and I think it's.
I'm only quoting Patriot Ledger, so if
Yeah,
Patriot
no, I
Ledger-
really think that was
No.
in comparison. The
so
it
that
was
would
like
be, that would be good information to bring.
I really think he said 80% of
He did.
Massachusetts already does it.
he did, because that was definitely one of the
And
things
Get
that I
that
was,
information
Yeah.
Exactly.
during the week, so
Pose
I
that
don't
to
think we need to,
Proponents.
so attempting to close Pandora's box for a moment.
Yes.
Do we have any questions on other points or articles?
I did forward to you
Before we
the question
end
on the poorly named piece of equipment that the DPW
Yes.
is requesting, so I
The-
did forward that to the chairman, so I.
And I will state it clearly for the record, the striper.
Yes, that is a piece of infield maintenance equipment, and I think everyone probably got a copy of. It is a substantial machine that is, and it's beyond its lifespan with the DPW. I assume you got what, the chairman probably distributed my email.
oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes, so that is not a push cart that puts down lines on a field, so, that has been on the capital plan for a couple of years now, so.
And it
it's-
does a lot more.
Yeah, so to the extent that there wasn't information available, again, it's just one of those things that's been out there for a little bit and finally moved its way up the plan, or there would have been a little more to talk about, so. Anyway,
And-
so if there's any more questions about that, please let us know.
And quick follow-up to the rest of the board, we discussed during the week as a follow-up to last week, as the generators for the fire department,
Yes.
the fire department is skeptical about potential reuse, but we are going to look into
Sure,
it.
it
So-
certainly doesn't hurt to have those evaluated once, assuming the town does vote to replace the fire department generators, which I can't imagine they won't do. If there's any reuse for them, they can be evaluated when they're decommissioned with the fire department, and happy to see if they have another home. Doesn't hurt. But again,
Point of clarification, September 2017 article, and their numbers were right. So it was 55 of the 317 school districts charge money. So they have 95% of all kindergartners in Massachusetts attend full day.
Yes.
88% attend for free. 55 communities charge for it, of which 12 are on the South Shore.
Yeah, I was gonna say most of them. Yeah, like a lot of the social charges.
Could we charge?
We already
We
do.
do.
$3,000 a year.
That was part of what the formula to
So that's
get to
why I was
was-
saying.
Therein lies the problem.
was
It's
if
$3,000.
children go to full-day kindergarten in Abington, they pay a fee.
And if you can't afford it, then you
But
go
if
to
you go to
half-day.
half-day kindergarten, it's free.
It's free, correct.
But then you only go for 2 hours as opposed to the full day, so then, to the poor kids only going 2 hours, they miss out because they're just not there. And,
But we're required to, by law, to
To-
at least provide
Right.
half-day.
or 2.5 or whatever hours
So
they're
we
there.
only are providing for free what is required of us, but then there's the additional, but if you want full day, you can pay for it, and that kind of is self-supporting,
So,
full day kindergarten right now.
is how
Other-
we're doing it.
Other questions? Anything from the annual articles that we would want to get follow-up for before next week?
Yeah, any of the like bigger purchases, when it comes to like buying a big, backhoe, whatever, is there a formula or consideration to look at, like I said, I think last time, look at like a 1, 2, 3-ish years, used one? If not, understandable. Again, I just don't know the way the actual process is. If we can only buy brand new, I don't know. Things like that, does it go into the mindset where if this is 26 grand, right, that other one's 150, so that's roughly 175, let's just call it, I'm sure there's another ish thing, 200 grand. Could we get that cost to 125 and use that 75 to literally pay for the other police officer?
Well,
Those are the things I'm trying to,
well, first of all, you wouldn't want to pay for staffing from a one-time money anyway, isn't it? So it
yeah,
wouldn't
I'm
be-
just talking about saving
But-
overall.
But the town has multiple regional bids to, state as well as, county. We partake of a regional services group that does regional procurements to leverage economies of scale so that we can get very effective pricing on equipment. And there's also municipal, which is something that communities use through MMA, and there's also a state site that we can look for, both dispose of and look for
Yep.
used equipment too.
Yep.
So there's over the past, particularly the last 10 years, there are outlets for us to look for municipal equipment.
Yep.
Without, that allows us to work within the procurement laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Sure.
Without having to go through these elaborate RFP processes,
Yep.
which again can be quite onerous, especially, for equipment over a certain value, so.
Sure, and my only thing would be to, if we are gonna look at buying a new piece of equipment, whatever it is, maybe even somebody come up with a specific value. If we are going to, it be presented to you or even to us, a brand new one and a used one. Maybe, again, there are guidelines to it, and the only reason that I'm saying it is because if over time, these things can save us a good chunk of money, because they are pretty decent chunks of money,
Yes, they are.
is it worth spending the extra 30 or 40,000 on a track? You know what I mean? Like, and it's just a decision. Maybe the answer is, hey, you know what? It's better off with a new one.
Yeah.
I have a sense a lot of times of just, obviously I'm new. A lot of people that have sat here just have looked over to me and said, this is the way we always done it. I am legitimately the worst person in the entire world to ever give that statement to, because, I don't know, I'm sure there's a million reasons. So, those are the things I, not that I stress over, but that I just say, hey, is there somebody, I'm sure that this is nice and it will work.
You have to keep in mind that this hasn't been bid yet. This is a piece of equipment, for instance, that will be shopped once it's approved along through these various municipal
Yep.
bids that are designed to get economies of scale, because the procurement laws of the Commonwealth are built for two reasons. One is to get economies of scale, to get best pricing for municipalities.
Right.
The second is to ensure, in addition to getting good pricing, to ensure that there is very little or no opportunity for fraudulent procurement practices. Not necessarily always the best pricing. They've developed to ensure that people don't buy from buddies and friends.
Yep.
Because I assume for many, many, many years, that was part of what was going on in the
Yeah,
municipal
sure.
government. So that's why, over the years, both from a regional perspective and at the state and the Mass Municipal Association level, there have been these consortiums put together to help municipalities deal with the procurement laws effectively and to get best pricing available. So there was a time when that was innovative. now. That's just kind of how, when you say, that's how we do business. Well, there's a reason why they do business that way, because it's been very, very effective for getting best pricing and to deal with the procurement laws of the Commonwealth, which again are, designed to, at what point, to eliminate cronyism, practices that were corruption, yes. I was trying not to say corruption, but that was corruption, yes. So that's what people have been used to using for a long time, because quite frankly, it's effective. So, but that doesn't mean we certainly can't keep people informed on what how things are procured as we go forward. After things are approved by the finance committee, absolutely.
I just think if we had a choice too, you know what I mean? Like, even you, when you go buy a car, you have a choice. You get
Well, there is a
you
choice.
can do this.
Well, again, what will happen is a department, and again, when I say there's a choice, we have, I'm the chief procurement officer of the community. We have the assistant town manager, the town accountant, are certified procurement officers, which is a designation through the Inspector General's Office of the Commonwealth. So, and they make sure that everything that is procured is done in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which can be quite onerous, depending on the scope and the threshold of the spending that's authorized. So departments have to, comply with the law, and it's obviously a lot easier when there are certain consortiums that are set up, and consortiums would buy, certain items and projects in bulk, and leverage the economies of scale and make those, let's just say, a piece of equipment over a certain price. The department, after authorized to purchase it, can go on and check the different lists, whether it's a state bid list or a county bid list, and find the item and, again, the pricing that particular consortium was able to get based upon that particular procurement, and then they can make a decision which is the most effective, which is, so. Right. So again, those things have developed over the last 10, 15 years, and they work, quite well. Certainly better pricing that people can get out of it. We don't pick up the phone and, go down to the local dealer and say, I need to buy a cruiser. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? So.
But a tractor. Yes.
No, we don't build that with tractors either. No, everything's built, everything is purchased.
No, I'm saying I do.
Oh, you buy tractors? Oh, you have a tractor?
Yes. What do you? Okay. Sure.
So anyway, so again, these, these have developed because of the effectiveness of buying tremendous economies of scale.
Yep.
But anyway.
Anything else?
And because of corruption.
So.
You sure? I think the last thing you said last time was something about the school committee, make sure a note got to them that maybe we didn't want to spend all of the extra money, something like that. Did that ever get back to whatever? It wasn't specifically you, it was us.
Peter.
Yeah, that was to the school building committee.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah, Peter.
Any amount of the amount that we are eligible or approved to spend, that we do not have to spend, don't spend. So don't just look for reasons.
Just a mindset of you do not have to.
So
Peter will be taking that to the next meeting.
Gotcha.
Of the school building committee.
So that makes me think, is this striper going to be used for the fields behind the new high school, being that AstroTurf? Or are they just
No.
one and
This
done?
is essentially.
The stripes are permanent?
We
This is
discussed
essentially
last week
infield,
that that field is different, and it's.
So that AstroTurf stuff, whatever it's called now,
Yes.
doesn't need stripes. I was just wondering if the school could buy the striper, use it for their field, then we could use it for the rest, like
This is
the
essentially.
the forklift could be
Little
used.
leagues, any
Like
dirt
all
field
the,
specifically.
different fields in
Yeah,
town.
yeah, oh, that's too bad.
This is a workhorse machine for,
Mhm.
Yep.
It's literally a tractor with a striper.
dirt,
Mm.
they never,
Yeah.
More of a
Yeah, I was
truck.
just wondering if the school needed it too, if they could buy it,
Out of the school building funds
yeah.
for the other
Yeah.
school fields, I don't know if that's, I don't know. That would certainly be.
That's a good idea, but I'm sure they'll say
This is essentially
no.
a park and recreation machine.
Yes.
Yeah,
more than
yeah, I
anything.
understand, I was just
Yeah.
trying to slide it in there.
So, if there are no further questions there, moving along, are there liaison reports? There were no correspondence. We do not have minutes to vote on this week,
Nor could we.
nor could we. Our next meeting is next week, May 9th. We are looking to have a representative from the school department at that meeting. We are hopeful to have a representative for the petitions for planning and zoning articles. Are there any other people that anyone on the board feels would be either necessary or beneficial to have at that meeting, which will be the meeting where we will vote on our recommendations on the articles?
So who did you say? Was somebody from the
School
school,
and
somebody from the.
planning, zoning.
Planning, zoning.
Anyone else?
I wouldn't say we want somebody, but I don't know if the fire person would, or the fire chief would want to be here for that specific thing.
No,
We
I
did-
don't, I don't think.
So he
that-
doesn't
I
rate.
will
We talked
speak to
about
him. I
that
think
with the
he's-
fire chief
yeah,
when
he's-
he was here. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he will be more than fine. I'll explain. I'm sure he'll be more than happy with your consideration that if there's a need for an end-of-year transfer, if the
I think he meant,
fireworks.
did you mean for the fireworks?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll explain to
Yes,
him
yeah.
your
What?
consideration.
I don't think-
He'll be more than fine with that. Again, he's just doing his best to cover his business.
Yep.
End of year,
Sure.
no problem.
With that, any other motions?
You can't,
A motion to adjourn.
because then you'd have to vote, right?
Oh, you can do that, you can do that.
You can motion, you
Yeah.
just can't vote.
No, you can vote, you
Well,
can
yes,
make a motion, you can adjourn a meeting.
Yes.
You can adjourn a meeting. Motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn?
We're not staying here all night.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning? The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
If anybody has any questions, budget articles during the week, please open